What's going on, guys? Aaron from Top Tier Gaming here, and today I'm coming at you with sort of a deck tier list for this weekend's 250th YCS event, where it's going to be in, 3 different locations, a really big YCS event, and I do plan to be there, which is one of the reasons I wanted to do this video now, is because there will be like a 5-day period after this where I won't have uploads, simply because I'll be at the YCS, which is very far away from where I live. So yeah, I wanted to get this video out, and I wanted to talk about what decks I think are going to be sort of standout decks at the event, or even the way I've set up the tier list, chance to win, many tops, essentially things like that. Talking about what decks I personally think are the best to take to this event. And, I'm not going to be giving away what I'm playing. I've been testing a bunch of different things. Before we get into this, I do want to let you guys know, Discord link down below, along with all of our social media links. Also, I'm trying to hit 14,000 subscribers, so if you do like this Yu-Gi-Oh content and you enjoy what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps me out and what I do here on the channel. And without further ado, let's start talking a little bit about this tier list. So, the tiers I have are Chance to Win, which are 1 or 2 decks that I think have the best possible chance to actually take the entire event. And of course, there's technically 3 events, so in these tiers there might be a few decks, because we could have, in theory, 3 different decks win the 250th YCS for their respective location. We have many tops, which are just like the really solid decks in the format where you could definitely expect to see, 10 plus in a top 64. So potential tops are decks that have a chance to see quite a few tops, like 3 or 4 at each event. So these are a little better than the maybe 1 or 2, which are the decks I think that could squeak in, like the very rogue decks that no one is really expecting out of left field, but maybe have a chance to get 1 or 2 tops in there. And then we have the Locals Legends, which are decks that, they're solid at Locals, but I wouldn't take them to this event specifically. They might not even be good at Locals. This is just the nicest thing I could give these decks. So yeah, obviously this is my deck tier list where I have all of the decks. So the ones that are going in the Locals Legends section, I'm not going to give them much time at all. Let's sort of get in here talking with ABC. I'm going to put it in Locals Legend. I think the deck's picked up some steam with Ancient Fairy Dragon, and people have been looking into it a little bit. I don't quite think it's there. You could argue for maybe 1 or 2. Phantom Knights, I'm also going to put in Locals Legends along with Burning Abyss. Again, these aren't decks that I'm really expecting to do super well, especially Burning Abyss. Where is our 3rd Beatrice? I don't understand. Pendulum, I don't feel like this deck has gotten weaker over time. In fact, I think it's just as solid as it was in tier format. Is there anything this for? Oh, it's because of the Kashtira zone lock. That's right. So I don't think people are really going to be on this deck. Truthfully, if people decide, not many people are going for zone lock, which could be different at this event because it's been so by the wayside for so long. But honestly, I could see Pendulum doing really good if people aren't afraid of the zone lock, but I'm going to put it here because no one's really playing it. Now, Plunder Patrol, I'm going to put in potential tops. I think it's much better than the maybe 1 or 2, right? Like, if we have 3 top 64s, we're talking about 128 plus 64, that's like 192. 192 tops. I would expect a lot more than 1 or 2 Plunder tops, personally. I think this deck has actually been trending upward with either the Plunder Runic variant or the regular variant that is now using Ancient Fairy Dragon with the Adventure Field spell, which I thought was such a cool innovation when Ancient Fairy got finally able to be played. And yeah, I have a lot of respect for Plunder. I think it's a really solid deck, and not many people interact with it super well, and it's Ash can be an issue for them in some situations, so everyone's prepared for it in that sense, but it's not like people are dedicating, really high impact cards against Plunder right now. So I think this deck is really solid. Stun decks, I'm gonna put in Locals Legends. This truthfully is a Locals Legend type deck where stun doesn't really get played much out of there. Same thing with Crystal Beasts. Last time this deck was something I would put it above Locals Legend was when Tierlament was a deck and you could just play 48 Floodgates for Tierlament, but as an engine, this deck cannot compete with what's going to be up here. Same with Cyber Dragon. Heroes, I would expect to see 1 or 2, actually. I feel like there are people who just play Heroes, and that's sort of what they do, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this deck sneak in a top. I think Heroes is just somewhat solid, and Nibiru's been so iffy this format, whether people are on it or not on it. Honestly, you could also argue this to be in Locals Legends, because are we really expecting hero tops? Maybe not. But I think we could see 1 or 2. It's never a deck I want to count out completely. DDD, I'm going to put that in Locals Legends. We've seen nothing of it in this format. I think the deck overall is strong, but it's not something people have really been playing. Alright, a big one is Branded. Where am I putting Branded? Because Branded has been so up and down this format. And I'm basing this all off my personal opinion. I'm not using any like spreadsheet information on all the recent YCSs and like YCS Peru and then all the regionals. I'm going based off my own experience. Now I have seen those spreadsheets, so I do know what the data looks like. You know, I watch a lot of content and I watch a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! I play a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! I know what all the data shows. And it shows that Branded's also been going down. But me personally, I think even at the events I've gone to, you can sort of see the play rate go down. It's really hard to decide to take Branded to an event that is going to be 11 to 12 rounds of Swiss, where you can just like count on like your hand. Well, I'm going to lose 1, 2, maybe even 3 matches to Ash Blossom alone. And then there's the D-Bearer matches I might lose. There's a lot of cards that just hard shut down Branded that are popular. And while I think it's a very strong deck, I'm going to give it many tops, maybe win. I don't really expect this deck to win though. I honestly expect maybe potential tops, but like I'm gonna put it here, which is gonna seem weird. Also, I don't want this tier list, what I don't want this to do is discourage anyone from playing the deck they're planning to take to the YCS. If you are planning on taking Branded and you have a lot of success with it, I fully, you know, encourage you to take that deck, because if it's like the deck you're doing well with, that's solid, it's a strong deck. I'm not trying to say, hey, your YCS pick is bad. That's not what I'm trying to do here. Any of these decks, if you want to take it, I encourage you to take the deck you think you will do best with, or just want to take. But personally, I don't think Branded is the call this event. It's so hard when your deck gets shut down by Ash Blossom so hard. And yes, there are some hands that can play through an Ash Blossom, but you start mixing that with other interruptions and like trying to break through boards plus Ash, it's very tough. So I'm gonna put Branded here. I do think it will do better than Plunder, even though I really like this deck, and I don't really care too much for Branded, but I do think that more people are on this deck overall, so it will have some success. Dinomorphia, unfortunate, Locals Legend. Dinosaur as well, Locals Legend right here. Cyberstorm Access is going to make this deck really strong, and this deck gets support later down the line too. So hopefully in future tier lists these can go up. Dragon Maid, definitely Locals Legends. Dragoon stuff and like Dragoon Stun. This is a really interesting picture icon I've chosen, because while Dragoon itself in like its specific deck like Dark Magician or like a deck like Guru hasn't seen any play, this did see some play in Labyrinth. However, I have a different icon for Labyrinth, so I will not be including Dragoon in that discussion, and I'll put him in Locals Legends. Eldritch, I actually have seen it at some regionals, and I think it has at least one top in the last 5 weeks at a regional. That being said, I don't expect, this is not a deck I'm expecting to do well. So I'll put Eldritch here. Flonderies, I'll put in the maybe 1 or 2. I don't think this deck is actually that bad at all. I think Flunder is just still a very strong engine. It can play D-Shifter, which actually hurts a lot of potentially good decks, except Kashtira. I think its engine is strong and it catches people more off guard now. That being said, I don't think I would put it as high as like Plunder or Runic. So I think maybe 1 or 2, even though I'm really expecting even a little more of that, 3 or 4 potentially. Exosister, Locals Legends, this is just not a real format for it. Drytron, I'm also going to put in maybe 1 or 2. I think this deck is very strong. The Bestials are nowhere. It's still one of the best decks going first, even though it has like so many hits. Well, I guess namely the hit to the deck is Ava at this point. But yeah, I think this deck's really solid. I think we could easily see 1 or 2. Maybe it could even find its way up here. I think people have been sleeping on Drytron, but Droll has been trending upwards in play, and hand traps are coming back a little bit more than board breakers, so I'm gonna put this here. Altergeist, Locals Legends for sure. Kashtira, now I'm gonna put Kashtira in chance to win. I don't think this is a surprise to anyone. Now my personal opinion on the deck is that I think if it does super well and it wins, it's not because it's the best deck in the room. I still don't know if I would consider this the best deck of the format personally. I think the numbers have shown it to be the best, but to me, personally, I think the reason that is because it has such a high play rate, therefore just naturally leading into a super high conversion rate. I think this deck is definitely to be talked about with 1 or 2 other decks as the best deck this format. And that's why it's very easy to put in chance to win, but personally, I still don't think it is the best deck. Maybe it is. It's really tough. It's in contention with 1 or 2 others. So yeah, obviously I'm going to put this in chance to win. The deck is super strong and pretty dominant. Gren Maju, like hard go second decks, I'm going to put in Locals Legends. Like playing go second Kashtira is just better than playing Gren Maju, so yeah. Harpies, definitely Locals Legend. Earth Machine, This is always interesting because I feel like Earth Machine always tops when I don't expect it to, and it's one of my favorite decks. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in Locals Legends. Rescue Ace, Locals Legends. Adignister, and this is pure, I'm not gonna count this as like Mathmech Adignister. This is gonna be pure Adignister, which I will put in the Locals Legend slot. I don't think this is particularly amazing right now. I mean, Kaijus are so popular that I find it really weird to like play this card, or like talking about the Arrival Cyber specifically. I just find it weird to take this deck when Kaijus are the thing in the meta just about. So yeah, I'm gonna put Adignister at Locals Legends. Alistair stuff, we're gonna definitely put in that in Locals Legends. Anything with spellbooks, Locals Legends. This is definitely, for a YCS, like when I do my normal tier list, this is structured differently, right? Like I'll have less decks down here, because talking about the overview of the format and you consider Rogue and Tier 2, this is not that tier list, right? So we're gonna have a bunch of decks that are just naturally not gonna do well, because these decks are either hit on the list in some way or not working this meta, right? And that's why this is gonna be so populated with decks. Tri-Brigade, I'm gonna put Tri-Brigade in 1 or 2, because I think Tri-Brigade Sprite is actually pretty good still. While I personally haven't picked it back up, like many of you may have seen on my channel, like Tri-Brigade Sprite combo videos and a deck profile when I was really into this deck in tier format, and I haven't picked it back up since Elf's ban. However, I have seen other people play the deck, and I do think it's somewhat competent. It does have 1 or 2 regional tops as well in the last few weeks, so I wouldn't be surprised to see this deck do pretty okay. I mean, Tri-Brigade is just usually pretty solid. Haha, Prank Kids, very funny, always putting it down here. Mei Meow Moo, rest on the ban list forever. We don't like this deck, and by we, I mean me. Infernity down here as well. Labyrinth, this is a deck I think I'm gonna put it in many tops, maybe win. I mean, I think it's better than Branded personally, but I also don't think this deck is very strong. I have such a problem with like, especially taking trap decks to very large events where you have to play like over 10 rounds of Swiss. That gives you so many more opportunities to be blown out by like double evenly or lightning storm evenly, and trap decks really struggle with that. That means you also have to naturally win more die rolls to see sort of the results you want, and like the impact of 1 loss at a 10 round event means less, or in this case 11 or 12 means less, so you can maybe argue that, but I think trap decks struggle at much larger events. And I also think Labyrinth is a deck that matters more about how you draw than how you play, which has always bothered me. That being said, the engine is strong. Some of the floodgates it's playing are insane. I do think it's one of the best decks in this format, so I'm going to put it in many tops, maybe win, although I expect it to maybe see numbers similar to Branded or Runic Plunder, Pure Plunder, but I do think the deck's a little bit better than these, so I'm going to put it here. Madolche, not this format. When Kashtira is a deck and non-graveyard decks are the meta, I don't think Madolche is very good. Paleozoic, one of my favorites because, you know, Paleo tier was such a fun deck. Since Kit Kalos' ban though, I don't think this deck's going to do anything crazy, so Locals Legend for sure. Mathmech. Mathmech is something that has been trending upwards for the last 4 or 5 weeks. The deck is just extremely solid. In fact, I want to put it up here next to Labyrinth. I think Mathmech is just so good. It does... My issues with Mathmech, because I've tested a lot of decks for the event, and Mathmech was definitely one that I've been testing. It has 2 things that destroy it very hard, being D-Shifter and Droll, which sort of bothers me. That being said, the engine is going to try to do the same thing every time, and it does it very well. One thing this deck might have a downside with is, even though the Bystials aren't super popular, Bell is definitely in a lot of people's side deck, and Bell is almost an auto win versus this deck because the whole deck is super factorial. I do think the deck's good. I think it has some glaring weaknesses. That being said, it does the sort of 1-card combo into a board into advantage sort of better than every other deck right now. So I do think Mathmech, in my opinion, is better than Branded and Plunder right now. Maybe not as good as Labyrinth, but I'm willing to put Mathmech here. If it doesn't get shifted or drolled, it doesn't really care if it goes first or second because it has so many flex spots. And I think overall the engine is very strong. Kashtira being one of the best decks can be weird, but as long as you draw anything to Outer Rise Heart, which a lot of them are now playing Small World to search a Kaiju, that's not really a problem. So I do think Mathmech is very solid. Mikanko stuff, it's really fallen off hard. Like, I'm surprised Elf's ban hurt this deck this much. And the fact that Droll's coming back in the format, I want to say that this deck's power level is still around here, but I'm going to put it in Locals Legend for now. Ninja, we've seen do things in the past, but that was when Kashtira was definitely expected to be one of the better decks and much more dominant than it is. And it's definitely fallen off since then. You could argue for Ninja to be here because it has had some play, but I'm going to put it in Locals Legend. Naturia, and more specifically Naturia Runic, I'm going to put here. I think this deck's very strong. I think it, again, has some glaring weaknesses. It's also pretty weak to Ash. Like, Ash on Cricket hurts so bad. But I do think this deck's extremely solid. One thing to note about taking a deck like this to, again, a big event, similar to how I'm going to talk about Labyrinth, is some of the deck's weaknesses will be more apparent when you play so many rounds, and losing your battle phase does just tend to, in like Paper Yu-Gi-Oh, be very bad. Like on Dueling Book, you'll see this deck do particularly well because there's no time limit, but when you're losing your battle phase, time comes into play. And I don't like being a Runic player when that sort of situation comes. And yes, it has Scarlight to get around that, but your opponent has time win conditions as well, and I don't tend to trust it as much. That being said, I could definitely see it here. Maybe you could make an argument for up here, but I'm going to put Naturia Runic sort of here. I do think it's better than Plunder. I honestly maybe think it's better than Branded. Just my personal opinion, but yeah, it's a very good deck. Pearly, we will see you a lot soon, but for now, that is not the case. Sky Striker, honestly, I'm surprised this deck's been so quiet recently. I don't think it's terrible. Maybe it could even be here because I feel like Striker somehow always manages to blow my mind when it comes to tops. But I'm going to put it in Locals Legend for now. Rika, I'm going to say 1 or 2. Personally, I think this deck is super strong. It just doesn't have the play rate. Like, this deck is so weird because I think people all accept it as strong. Everyone acknowledges it as a good deck, and then no one chooses to play it. And I find this to be common in my videos too. Obviously, I have a regional top and a couple of case tournament wins with Rika. I can even tell in my videos, it's just not that popular of a deck. Like, I'll upload a deck profile, and it does less well than others. So I don't know what it is about Rika, but it just seems like the player base isn't inclined to play it. That being said, I think anyone who does take Rika Sun Avalon, the deck's super powerful. So as long as you have outs to Kashtira, and the field spell is super good for that reason, and it gets around things like Forbidden Lance as well, distributing their stuff. Yeah, I think Rika's solid. I'm willing to put this here. If more people are playing it, I would definitely put it here, but like, I'm gonna put it in maybe 1 or 2. Emancipator, this is not the OCG, you can go in Locals Legend. Runic Stun, you know, because Runic encapsulates more, I mean, I'm gonna say this is Runic Stun. I'm just going to put my foot down and say Runic Stun will not get a top. 1, because I don't want it to, and 2, because I think, like, in the TCG, we haven't seen Runic Stun really do anything, and pure Runic is just not, I don't expect it to get any top, so I'm gonna put it there. Salad, I know this did well at Peru. I'm still going to put it in Locals Legend. I just don't think it's even your best Cyburst option. I think there are 2 Cyburst decks very clearly, in my mind, better than Salamangreat, so I'm going to put this in Locals Legend. B-Trooper, very cool deck. Definitely Locals Legend. Oh, I'm going to have to scroll down, which means I'm going to have to adjust everything. Shark, funny enough, I actually tested this deck like last weekend where I was really desperate to try to figure out what I wanted to play. And I was like, yo, Shark, 1-card combos that are really good, run a lot of flex spots. That's nice, can make Zeus, can make Exciton. After testing it some more, yeah, Locals Legend. That was definitely some copium. Locals Legend for sure. Same with Weather Painter. Sprite is a big one. I can see we're actually getting to some very big decks here. Sprite, I'm going to put in Chance to Win. I think, personally, I would right now say Sprite is the best deck in the format. Now, Sprite is a bunch of different things. I could be talking about Evil Twin Sprite that I recently did super well with at Houston. Melfi Sprite's something I've been testing because Melfi Sprite is pretty solid. Again, I've tested just about every deck on this list near the top echelon. But Sprite is something that also has been trending upwards in play, and I think it's a really strong deck. Yeah, I have high hopes for Sprite, whether it's Adventure Sprite, Evil Twin Sprite, Melfi Sprite. Not really Runic Sprite. I don't think Runic Sprite is that good. Maybe if you throw Evil Twins in with it, it's okay. But Sprite in general, I expect to do extremely well at these YCSs. And maybe I would say Sprite potentially could be the best archetype right now. It's been trending so high upwards, and I think people are starting to realize how to play Sprite again. I think Sprite's going to do really well. Sword Soul, I'm going to put in potential tops. Maybe 1 or 2. You could argue for it to be down here, but I do think Sword Soul, its engine just plays, which is what I really like about it. In a lot of situations, it will find itself doing at the bare minimum solid in every game. I do think Kaiju's being popular is a little weird for this deck, and like Lava Golem's been trending down, but I do think Lava Golem exists, and I think Sword Soul is hurt by that a lot. So I think this deck has some problems with the way the current meta is set up, but I think it's a very strong engine that can play enough Go Second cards to make it okay. So yeah, I think Sword Soul will do pretty solid. Tierlament, honestly, maybe 1 or 2. This is a very hot take. People have been experimenting with Tierlament. Yeah, Tierlament I don't think is dead. I've seen a bunch of innovation with this deck recently. It's a deck I tested a lot at the beginning of this format that I personally decided to stray away from because it doesn't have that many like flex spots to out the format. But it can do so many cool things, whether it's on Lunalight or whether it's doing like the Muddy Mud Dragon stuff from your extra deck when you're running Cartasia. It's pretty nifty. I really like this deck, and I'm gonna say maybe 1 or 2 Tierlaments could pop up. Maybe that's Cope as well, but yeah, I'm gonna put Tierlament here. Dragons, definitely 1 or 2. I'm never counting this deck out. It's playing Bestials, which aren't great this format, but you could play against these two, and then it's really solid, and it has implication versus Sprite, so like Dragon Link or Bestial Control, I think we'll definitely get 1 or 2 tops. Maybe you could argue it here, but I don't think it's been doing that great this format. It's been doing solid enough for itself, but nothing amazing. I'm going to put Dragon Link here. Traptrix, I'm also going to put here. I feel like Traptrix, personally, I think they're still just less good Labyrinth. Now, it's one of my favorite decks, and I do think there are still a number of players on this strategy, so I'm willing to say 1 or 2. But I don't think it's as good as the decks above it, and maybe it's better than some of the decks down here. Like maybe you could put this, maybe you could even put it at the top of maybe 1 or 2. I expect 3 or 4 in all realness. I could see Traptrix definitely topping across, again, 192 top spots if all 3 are top 64s. But I think I'm willing to put it in this tier. Evil Twin, which I guess you could put Evil Twin Sprite specifically. I don't know. I just don't like having this picture. Like, I want to put it in Sprite variants. So yeah, I'm just not going to mess with the Twin Sprite thing. Like, I think Twin Sprite is a good version of Sprite for sure, but I don't want to put it, like, next to the Sprite picture. So I'm just going to leave this down here. Marincess. Here's the thing. Marincess is one of the Cyburst decks I was talking about that I think is much better than Salad, so yeah, I think Marincess could see 1 or 2 tops. I have a regional top 8 this format with Marincess. That was very early format. I don't think everyone knew what they were doing quite yet, and it was not the largest regional, but I do have a top 8 finish with Marincess. I think it's very good. I think it is slightly less good than Mathmech because it loses to the same cards outside of Droll. It doesn't really lose to Droll. But its engine isn't always as consistent going second. Like, it also has Zelantis, which I think is a big bonus, but I'm going to put Marincess here and Mathmech here. I think Mathmech is the better Cyburst deck still. But I do think Marincess has reason to be played over Mathmech if you're deciding to take it, and I personally love the deck. So I would be happy to see it do well, but I'm going to put it in maybe 1 or 2. Agents, I think obvious Locals Legend. Maybe when we get Apple Dragon, this deck will be better. Virtual World hasn't seen play in a millennia, even though, you know, we just need to get into like a Prank Kids-esque format or a Dragon Link format where Shen Shen's good and this deck will be okay. Punk variants, I could see maybe 1 or 2. The deck's not like super amazing. In fact, I think it was better in Tierlament format, funny enough. But I think the engine's strong enough, and like there's some Therion stuff going around, and I've seen a couple of Punk tops. So I'm willing to put this in maybe 1 or 2. Zombie stuff, I'm going to put in Locals Legend. Generator, I think this deck is actually very nifty and very cool. That being said, I don't think it will top, so I'm going to put it here. Gishki, same thing. I've seen people try to like re-innovate with this deck recently on Dueling Book as well. So like it's been impressing me a little bit. I don't think it's one of the good Sprite variants, so I'm going to put it here. Dark World. This is interesting. So Dark World, engine-wise, probably the best deck like in the format. If we're talking about just an engine, I think Dark World is definitely near the top. That being said, a lot of stuff this meta absolutely destroys it. Obviously, you have D-Shifter in decks like Kashtira, some Sprite side decks, some Fluandereeze players. Well, I guess all Fluandereeze players. But you can run into D-Shifter. Droll's been upticking in play a little bit. You don't want to see that as a Dark World player. It doesn't get that many go second cards, so naturally going second can be weird. I mean, the dangers are really good, but you don't have many hard go second cards outside of like Radiant or Lava Golem. It has a couple of glaring weaknesses. That and like just an Arise Heart in the wrong hand just ends you. So yeah, I mean, Dark World I think is insane, and I'm gonna put it in maybe 1 or 2, but maybe you could even argue it to be here. Like, Dark World is so good that I think even with the glaring weaknesses, it can be a deck that gets quite a few tops. But I'm just gonna put it in near the front of 1 or 2. I don't think that many people are on it because, especially at a long event, you're likely to run into those more. So yeah, I'm gonna put Dark World here. Springens, very cool deck. I'm still going to put it in Locals Legends. And then Scareclaw, which I have randomly been seeing this deck get a lot more play recently on Dueling Book, and I don't know if it's because a lot of people are testing it and planning to take it to this event. Because I've seen the play go up, I'm actually going to put it in maybe 1 or 2. I think it's an okay deck. I don't think it's anything super amazing. It's not a deck I would take if my goal was to win. I don't think it's like a winning deck. But I wouldn't be just surprised to see a couple of these top. This has definitely been one of the higher end of rogue decks, I think, this format, just on play rate I've been seeing. Which may sound weird. It's not everywhere. Like, maybe what I'm saying just sounds so off to some people. But I've played against it quite a few times on high-rated dueling books, so, like, yeah, I could see this deck doing okay. I think it's better than a lot of these decks down here. Maybe not all of them, but quite a few of them. And yeah, that's going to be it for this tier list. Very long. I think, looking back at it, this is pretty reasonable to what I think will do well. I don't know if there's any really hot takes. Maybe me saying that I think Sprite is actually a little better than Kashtira. Maybe putting Branded this low is a hot take. Maybe some of these decks are weird, but I think overall I'm satisfied with this list. Let me know what you guys think down below, if you would do it any different. What deck maybe was I forgetting that you think could do well? And yeah, I'll be sure to read those comments down below. Hope you enjoyed. This has been Aaron from Top Tier Gaming. Bye, YouTube.